Good afternoon. Welcome to the April 12th committee meeting for the Community Development Housing General Government Committee. I call it to order. The way we operate these meetings are that our agenda is broken into two parts, one being the consent items and the other being the general agenda. If the items on consent agenda are not pulled by individual council members for comment, then we approve them with one motion. The consent agenda items that we will be working on in this committee typically include cases where houses are being voted on to be torn down. So I would like to know if anybody in the audience is here to speak on any of these cases. Let me point out that there were three of the agenda items from there that were pulled. C1B, C2D, and C3 were pulled. So if there's anybody in the audience to speak to 424 East 16th Street, 310 Clayton Street, 2606 Machine Street, 200 Stanleyville Manor Avenue, 0 Polo Road, Superior Electro Finishes, 2109 Walltown Street, that's an accessory building, 2710 Walltown Street. Okay. So, members of the committee, are there any items that we would like pulled for discussion?
I move for approval.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, those are approved. To the general agenda. G1, Youth Advisory Board Annual Report. Do we have a reading on that?
Item G1, Youth Advisory Board Annual Report.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Isabella Rico. I am the current chairperson of Youth Advisory Council for this year. This is Logan Short. He is an honorary member of our council. And Victoria Rivera is handing out some stuff to you. She's also an honorary member of our council. I'd like to give you a quick overview of some of the many things that we've been involved in this year. We hosted a service learning conference here in Winston-Salem, as to which all the youth councils around North Carolina came and was able to enjoy our wonderful city. We participated in the International Village, the Race Relations Forum, March for Homeless People, which was in the Christmas parade here in Winston-Salem, the Student Awards Banquet, and then Everyone Matters Day, which was our annual project for this year, and Logan will talk more about later on. We were able to receive grants for this project as well. We received the State Youth Council mini grant awarded us $400, and then the Youth Grant Makers in Action awarded us $250. Our future prospects is a group of us going to the Charlotte Youth Advisory Council Spring Convention, where we will also talk about our annual project and about the greatness that we have been doing here in Winston-Salem. So here's Logan.
Thank you, Isabella, and thank you, distinguished and honorable members of this council and this committee, for all your work that you do for the city and for everything that you have done for Youth Advisory Council. My name is Logan Short. I am a senior at Calvary Baptist Day School in Winston-Salem, a 2-year member of the Winston-Salem Youth Advisory Council, 1 year serving as the vice chair, and this year serving as the chairman of the Governmental Affairs Committee. And so I just want to highlight a few things concerning political disillusionment among our youth, also speak to the importance of the Winston-Salem Youth Advisory Council in Winston-Salem, and then explain our convictions and explanations behind choosing Everyone Matters Day as our annual project. So first, briefly to begin, it's not a new concept, the political disillusionment in our youth and in our nation as a whole, especially among our youth, but also among everyone that's in the country nowadays. In a study released by Gallup poll along with The Atlantic, both observe our that 19% of Americans believe that they can truly trust their government, and that has dropped from its height at 81% during the first Persian Gulf War. Voter turnout rate is ranked 120th in the world out of 169 eligible nations, hovering right around 66% of registered voters and dropping to 40% of voters ages 18 to 24. And so as we see, political disillusionment, and Winston-Salem's no exception, is rampant in our country and in North Carolina at this present time. And so that's why the Winston-Salem Youth Advisory Council and other advisory councils across the state and the country are so important. And it's twofold. One, because it gives the youth a chance for their voices to be heard as we're doing today, but also because the Winston-Salem Youth Advisory Council is a representative council. We represent our schools, and we represent their points of view, and we make decisions and take action upon issues that we believe are important to students at schools all across Winston-Salem from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic stances, different religious stances, and all types of things of that nature. But also because we get to see the goodness in our government. Most people in the millennial generation are very skeptical of their government and very distrusting towards their government. But we get to see, by working with Miss Wanda and Miss Jamie and the mayor and you great and honorable council members, we get to see the goodness in our government and the goodness that lies in local government and government being decentralized and back to the local communities. And so now I just want to briefly speak on, in the time that we have remaining, for the reasons that we chose Everyone Matters Day, because in light of the two things that I've already mentioned, why we chose Everyone Matters Day for our annual project. We have a division problem in America. Also, The Atlantic released another study that said most Americans believe that we are more divided in America now, the greatest amount since the Great Depression, except for the heart of the civil rights movement. We're divided by party lines, we're divided by race, we're divided by gender, sexuality, religion, and the list continues to go on. But Everyone Matters Day is a global celebration of individuality, unity, and acceptance across all cultures. And also, in contrast to many social movements that are arising nowadays, Everyone Matters Day celebrates everyone because of their humanity and not based upon any cultural or economic or societal factor. So what better way for the Winston-Salem Youth Advisory Council to bring Winston-Salem together at a time like this than to celebrate all members of our community in one display of citywide unity. So thank you so much. I hope you were able to attend the event. The mayor was there, but it was a great time, and everyone that was there enjoyed it. But it also just takes another step in the right direction towards unity and acceptance and working with people that have different opinions than we do, as our government needs to be doing. But thank you all for your work that you do for Winston-Salem and everything you've done for us on the Youth Advisory Council these last 2 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Comments?
Just to say thank you to the Youth Advisory Council, and whenever you decide to run for office, call me so I can work on your campaign.
Appreciate it.
Councilmember Montgomery almost qualifies for your group. A little bit aged out, but not much. Barely. Yes, Councilmember.
I'm always pleased and happy when I see the Youth Advisory Council doing something in this community. And we say thank you to you. I was most impressed when I attended the meeting at Parkland, and I brought it before this council and the mayor, how young men and young women stood up, and how you feel about your city, and how you feel about this country, and how you feel people ought to be working together. And in looking at this and listening to this, I say simply that we need to treat people fair and right and be sensitive about all people. And I thank you for the time and effort as young people that you put into this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Adams.
Yes, thank you again for all that you do. It's interesting that a lot of the, I guess, political organizations, adult political organizations, particularly the women, we're looking to enhance any political/government participation that young people, millennials and young people can participate in. We put together a survey, the Women in Government of North Carolina, to see how many youth organizations there were throughout the state. And surprisingly, as you probably already know, there are hardly any. You're one of probably maybe 20, if that many. And the same goes for the college as well. I challenge you, I know you do, but I would challenge you to continue to do the good work you're doing. Make sure your friends, people that aren't your friends, that are your age, get them plugged in, even if it's in, like you said, through your mission, your social media. Because like we know, we're old adults. If you're not plugged in, then you're part of the problem because you're not helping with the solution. And your generation probably has a lot more solutions than our generation because of your exposure to so much of the world at such an early age. So again, I thank you so much for what you do, and please keep doing what you do. Don't get disheartened. We get disheartened too, but don't get disheartened, but continue to do the good work that you do and spread how important it is to be involved and engaged. Thanks. Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to add my thanks and urge you to continue on. It's easy, I think, for people to get involved and get passionate about presidential politics. Mm-hmm. Local politics actually is an area where you can make much more of a difference, where you can actually see the fruits of your efforts. And so I know it's easy to kind of get swept up in the media. There's not as much hype around what goes on at this bench as there is at the presidential level, but in most cases it affects what you do day to day much more dramatically and directly. So I would urge you to stay local. We'd love to have you remain in Winston-Salem and bolster our economy, but wherever you go, we wish you much success. And thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, and let's recognize the staff member who's most involved in this, Wanda. Alan Abraham, thank you so much for the hard work that you do. I know it takes a lot of time and effort, and we really appreciate it. Item G2.
Item G2, College Advisory Board Annual Report.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
My name is Ivania White. I'm a sophomore at Wake Forest University. I'm the Government Affairs Chair for the College Advisory Board. Right now we're passing out our newsletter. So the board and I have worked diligently this year to make sure that as members of the College Advisory Board that we remain involved and action-oriented, as we've shown through our involvement with Mayor Joines' Poverty Thought Force and our recent College Summit event. Last year, during our first few meetings, Mayor Joines actually asked us to help him with the event so that we can represent our roles in front of community leaders and they can see us and how we're actively trying to better the Winston-Salem community. Participating in the Poverty Thought Force is actually what gave us the idea of how we wanted to format our college summit. Actually, go ahead, introduce yourself.
I'm Brittany Reminger. I'm the secretary of the board, and I go for SciTech.
All right, so yeah, the Poverty Thought Force actually gave us the idea of how to format our college summit with the World Cafe style, asking a question, having a scribe, and that person actively listening and taking notes to what the ideas that people were giving them. We wanted the students to attend the college summit to be able to do the exact same thing, as our goal is to help college students stay in Winston-Salem and retain them here. So we wanted to give them programming that gave them the opportunity of what their ideal Winston-Salem would look like and what would encourage them to stay here. With this idea, we thought it would be best to kind of give students a tour of downtown Winston-Salem. So the first part of the event was actually a bus tour just around downtown areas, showing some sites, the new developments that's currently being built. After this, students returned here to City Hall, where they met in 3 small circle groups, and each answered 3 guiding questions, and each group got to answer each one of the questions. The first question that we asked was, how can our local government, academic institutions, and local businesses help create or work together to expand job opportunities in Winston-Salem? So there were many ideas given. Suggestions included things like creating liaisons between schools, local businesses, and the government so that there is some type of way to know what's going on. I personally know that at Wake Forest that we do not hear much about the job opportunities here in Winston, so having someone, I know Councilman Taylor works at Winston-Salem State, so he's able to
bring those ideas to the table as far as like what job openings are available within the city. So having that at each and every school would be a really great idea. Also, the students really love the college summit, so someone actually suggested that maybe we do it twice in a year, once in the fall, once in the spring, so that especially seniors can get the opportunity to network before the spring, because at this point in the year they're really looking at where they want to live and where they're going. So if in the fall they're able to speak to these businesses and get internship opportunities throughout the year, or even just promises of jobs later, like once they graduate, that will encourage them to definitely stay in Winston and look at Winston-Salem as a place they want to stay. Also, another idea was like to have an avenue through our college advisory board website where students, local businesses, and local government can go and post any events or job openings that there are, as just like a little hub for us as college students here in Winston. And this would keep them updated on things happening. Another idea was for businesses to give more paid internships, because we often see a lot of unpaid internships, and money from institutions aren't always necessarily available for students to have to stay, especially if we're speaking of the summer. Not everyone's from Winston, so living can definitely be something like where they will live is definitely something that's in the back of their head when determining whether or not they want to take these internships in Winston-Salem. So definitely maybe having an avenue for paid internships or even a grant so that they can get have this money over the summer so they can live and stay in Winston and work. And then another thing for that question that students actually wanted was to be able to intern throughout the year, where businesses actually understand that they are still students and that their schedules would have to be built around their school schedule, because they are a student first, and they would really love the opportunity to intern but not jeopardize what they're doing at school. The second question that we asked was, how can Winston-Salem create a more vibrant social climate for recent college graduates? As it was shared Saturday, a lot of college students feel as though Winston-Salem is a retirement city. It is a very beautiful city, but there's not much for young adults to feel or to do that they feel. Many students are interested in social life, and with this, they want to connect alumni together from the Big Five schools so that they can all interact with each other. Events connecting them could include mixers or even festivals where they can get together and go and enjoy music. Also, prior to this, we would want to create a transit system that goes to all the Big Five schools, so before graduating, they can make these connections with students in the area, and they are getting to know other Winston-Salem college students. There were also going back to the idea of CAB having a website, having a young professionals message board where students can, or college graduates or students can interact with one another to advertise events or post job openings that they may know of, or if they're working at a certain place, telling other students or graduates, hey, my job is offering this, so having that avenue to do. The last idea that was given was having a universal educational research and resource center for students to come to somewhere in a central location so that you can meet people from the area who possibly have your same major or possibly are interested in the same things that you are, and that would definitely make a bigger connection amongst college students here and definitely help them retain or stay in Winston-Salem if they're making these connections and they're finding these jobs together and they're going out and searching for them. The final question we asked was, in what ways can Winston-Salem facilitate an increase in affordable housing for recent college students? The most brought up topic was definitely what is affordable housing, because we see that housing fluctuates depending on the area, but for most college students graduating around 600, 700, if they're going right into working after college, is their ideal range for pricing. Also, creation of graduate-only housing in the city would be successful, because this also goes back to the idea of the social climate and having those people you can go to that are your age that can give you the same or give you information that you would be looking for, because they're also looking for the same thing. Another idea that was given was that businesses can create incentives to provide long-term reduced rent leases for recent graduates so that they can work and build up their money and actually be comfortable in the lifestyle before they're paying for rent. So not even necessarily paying for the whole rent, just paying half or anything that will help them get on their feet and transition into a new position in society, because previously they were just students probably living on campus not paying anything, and now they're into the real world and it's like, here's everything you have to do, figure it out on your own. So so there are many things we learned from the Retention World Cafe. The students that came were definitely committed to speaking their voices and making sure that they were being heard by everyone that was in the room. As representatives of students in the area, we both hope that through us that their concerns can be heard to you all and considered while thinking of policies to increase retention of college students in Winston-Salem.
Thank you very much. Comments, questions from committee? Yes, ma'am.
Comment. So good to hear your suggestions and recommendations to the city. And as we know, it's not just for us, it's for the city as a whole. I'm participating right now in Leadership Insight, and I think one of the nights, the whole night, evening, was spent talking about, again, how do we retain and keep young people here when they finish school. And the big thing that everybody agreed upon was internships and how we make that happen. So I can promise you, I hope you'll be around, but I can promise you that that one's coming down on the fast track. There's some business leaders and others who are working on how we can make Winston-Salem the internship destination location for the country with what we have here with our businesses and companies that are here. So you'll be hearing more about that. The group as a whole, they agreed. We can't assume that the way that we got a job and came into the workforce through reading the newspaper and a family member and somebody knew somebody, it's a different day, and we have to treat it as such in order to, again, bring you in and to hopefully that you'll stay and be engaged and work here in the city. I think the organization, you've done a lot. I'll be getting with Wanda afterwards or later on to give her the contacts with Leadership Insight so we can follow up on that as the city, because one of the things they asked me was, well, what does the city do? You know, and I told them about your group and the youth group and some other initiatives that we have. But again, this is going to be a collaboration of all of us working together to try to make this city engaging for you, your generation. So I think we can do that. I think we can do that. And again, thank you guys for doing, again, everything that you're doing to try to keep your peers engaged to what's going on in the city and government. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Montgomery.
Yep. First is a simple thank you to you all and to the rest of the members of the CAB. I will ask is that the all of those recommendations, I don't know if we can get those in another format to really go through, because it's one thing to hear the information and hear those items put out. It's another thing to actually take steps to see how we can actually actualize some of those items and see them come to fruition. And I heard a lot of great ideas throughout all of that. And so I would like to see how we can work to bring some of those things to fruition as a community. So again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And one last thing,
Okay.
but I also thank you for your hard work. I know on top of school, doing this is an extra burden, so we appreciate you putting in the effort. An awful lot of what I sort of a big picture thing I took from a lot of your suggestions revolved around communication and connections, and I think it's incredibly important for us to foster that. I know people who have got jobs because of their connections, and they may be family-wise or whatever. I think it's incumbent on us to make sure that we make those connections regardless of who your family is.
Right.
And to promote diversity and to just make Winston-Salem as great an opportunity as we possibly can. We want to retain the talent that graduates here in Forsyth County. We want to keep them close. So these are great groups of suggestions, and I think if we can turn them into some policies, that would be awesome. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
And again, thanks to staff. All right, next item on our agenda is G3.
Item G3, resolution expressing concern regarding inadequately considered provisions and consequences of House Bill 2 and calling for review and reconsideration of the legislation.
This is an item that was brought to us last month at committee and was forwarded to full council and then brought back to us for further discussion. I'd like to start the conversation off by having Councilmember Bessie talk to us about. I'd first like to have the resolution read. Then I'd like to ask Dan to give us some of his insight and his intent on offering a resolution. So if we could have the resolution read. Sure. Dan, if you could read it, that'd be great. Thank you.
All right, here's the language as it stands, as it was originally introduced for council discussion at our meeting at the end of March. Whereas the North Carolina General Assembly was called into special session on March 23rd, 2016, supposedly to deal with a single controversial provision in the City of Charlotte's recent amendments to its long-standing local ordinance regarding non-discrimination in public accommodations. And whereas the special session in fact introduced and enacted sweeping legislation, House Bill 2, dealing with a broad range of individual and local government rights and responsibilities. And whereas this action was taken without advance notice of the legislation's contents and without opportunity for input from impacted local governments, businesses, or the public, or even most members of our legislature. And whereas initially unrecognized consequences of this inadequately considered legislation are beginning to come to public light, and whereas those adverse consequences include but may not be limited to the following: all local ordinances regarding non-discrimination in public accommodations and employment are revoked and further such ordinances banned. There are now no state or local non-discrimination laws in North Carolina for public accommodations or employment regarding marital status, familial status, sexual orientation, or gender identity. Local governments are now prohibited from requiring in their contracts with businesses, even for local public work using local public tax revenues, any provisions regarding non-discrimination or good employment practices, wages and salaries, sick or family leave or other benefits, or other requirements that exceed the generally applicable minimum state requirements for all private employers. Local governments may have been stripped of their ability to use their contract bidding process to promote the development of local minority and women-owned businesses as contractors and subcontractors on public projects. The decades-old right of employees to sue their employer under state law if fired for a legally prohibited reason was eliminated, making North Carolina one of only 2 states in the nation without any effectively enforceable state law protecting private sector employees from workplace discrimination based on race, religion, color, national origin, or sex. And whereas these inadequately considered changes are already raising concerned questions nationally among businesses and industries considering locating, expanding, or doing business in our state, with potentially severe and far-reaching adverse impacts on our state and local economy. And whereas these inadequately considered changes appear to undercut and retard our local efforts to build our community's economic base and promote development of jobs and economic opportunities, especially for historically disadvantaged and underserved members of our community. And whereas these sweeping new restrictions on local efforts to build welcoming communities are severely damaging our state's reputation nationally as a place where all people are welcomed to take part in our civil society and economy without fear or discrimination. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Winston-Salem calls for a public legislative investigation, review, and determination of the nature of these and other concealed or inadequately considered adverse consequences of HB 2. And be it further resolved that the City of Winston-Salem calls on the members of our Forsyth County State Legislative Delegation to work to reconsider and undo these inadequately considered and damaging legislative changes during the 2016 legislative short session and, if necessary, in subsequent legislative sessions. That's the original resolution as introduced and as it stands before the committee today. I would say that, since I introduced this resolution 2 weeks ago, there have been at least 2 developments I think are relevant to its consideration. One, there's been broadening public understanding of the surprising scope of the bill and how it goes far beyond any legitimate question of bathroom privacy concerns. And second, the adverse reaction to the bill as a whole has grown even stronger and wider. National businesses have canceled job-creating business expansion projects in our state or even announced plans to move operations already here. More individuals, companies, and even other states have announced that they will not attend conferences in our state or sponsor travel here. And there has been growing bipartisan adverse reaction nationally from sources as surprising as the Republican governors of Ohio, Georgia, and South Carolina. In general, it's increasingly clear that a wide-ranging piece of legislation that was publicly revealed, passed, and signed into law over the course of 12 hours was not well thought out and needs to be reconsidered on an urgent basis. And that's what this resolution asks for. And I'd point out that we've already had about 2.5 weeks more to consider this resolution simply expressing concern than most legislators had to review the sweeping statewide legislation that landed us in this problem situation in the first place. So that's the basics of the resolution and why I introduced it. Without jumping the gun, I'll note that we've gotten some good analysis from our attorney about some of the factors involved in the resolution, and as a result, I will, at the appropriate time, have one minor technical correction to suggest to one of the whereases.
Without objection from the committee, I'd like to ask City Attorney to give us some overview on what the legal impact is to the City of Winston-Salem from both the state and from the federal government, what we might be facing.
Sure, I'll be happy to. I don't know if you brought your memos with you or not, but what I thought I would do is maybe start on page 5, section 3, because when you look at the legislation and you look at, which is what I focused on, the impacts of the legislation on city ordinances, resolutions, and city employees, I think there are 2 areas where there is a potential impact. And I sort of addressed those in section 3 on page 5. And the first section I'd like to draw your attention to, if you happen to have the bill before you, if not, I'll read it quickly. If you will look at section 3.1C of the bill, it reads, the General Assembly declares that the regulation of discriminatory practices in employment is properly an issue of general statewide concern, such that this article and other applicable provisions of the general statutes supersede and preempt any ordinance, regulation, resolution, or policy adopted or imposed by a unit of government or other political subdivision of the state that regulates or imposes any requirement upon an employer pertaining to the regulation of discriminatory practices in employment, except such regulations applicable to personnel employed by that body that are not otherwise in conflict with state law. I think it's clear that in terms of our ability as a local government to impose employment regulations on third parties, other employers, we don't have that ability. And the city does not have an ordinance that does that. But we do have personnel policies that pertain to our employees. And as you all know, it does cover, our personnel policy covers sexual orientation. And if you look at EEOC guidance, EEOC interprets and enforces the term sex to include sexual orientation and gender identity. So when you look at EEOC guidance and the fact that they can interpret and enforce the term sex broader than what's allowed by state law, it sort of puts the city in a precarious position. Do you as a city, or do we as a city adhere to EEOC guidance when it comes to our employees and providing protections to our employees, or do we look towards state law, and what exactly does that phrase, not otherwise in conflict with state law, mean? Does that mean when state law defines sex to be biological sex, which is based upon what your birth certificate says, that we can't really extend those protections to our employees based upon sexual orientation and gender identity? So it almost creates a precarious situation. Do we run the risk, for example, if an employee who is a transgender female, which means the person, as I understand it, born as a male but identifies as a female, says to the city, I want to use the women's restroom, under EEOC, I would think that we'd be obligated to allow that person to use the women's restroom. But under state law, it almost suggests that we can't do that. So do we run the risk of getting an EEOC charge and potential litigation because of this caveat or this qualification? So I think that's one area where there's potential impact on our employees that may or may not have been intended. It's my understanding today the governor has potentially clarified that to say municipalities, you can have your own rules and regulations. And it's my understanding that there may be clarification later on in terms of the legislation to indicate that. But when you look at the current legislation on its face, it raises a question as to whether or not you can provide those protections to your own employees.
Question.
Yes, Attorney Carmen, based on what we know now versus 2 weeks ago, and various municipalities across the state, particularly the urban core municipalities, have most of them have passed resolutions. I guess my comment would be, what is any different in theirs than ours? I would think all of us are basically on the same page. And if not, at this point, what difference does it make as long as we make it clear where we stand? I don't hear of the state or anybody else challenging the other cities about the resolutions, even Greensboro or whatever, that have been passed. So for me, I'm not even concerned about that. I say let's move forward and let's Winston-Salem show that we're going to do what's just and what's right for the citizens and the employees that work for us, and we'll work through it when it comes our way. Right now, the name of the game is to make sure that everybody understands that we're for what's right and what's just.
Okay.
Any questions for Ms. Carmen?
You want me to go over the second impact?
Yes, please.
Okay. The second impact, based upon what's in the law right now, it's clear if you look at section 3.2, which is on that same page in the legislation, it says this article does not create and shall not be construed to create or support a statutory or common law private right of action, and no person may bring a civil action based upon the public policy expressed herein. Before HB2, our employees, along with other citizens, had the ability to bring a common law right of action based upon wrongful termination due to race, sex, and other protected categories. And it's clear with this language in the bill that our employees no longer have that right. Yeah. Again, I understand that the governor just indicated that there's going to be an effort to address that category, but as it stands right now, the bill that we have on the books does have that impact on our employees. We don't have, any pending lawsuits, but in terms of the impact upon our employees, that right was taken away. So we have those two specific rights as it relates to our employees that have been impacted by the bill. And just briefly, in terms of other provisions in the bill, for other various reasons, we don't have an employment ordinance that impacts third-party employers. We don't have a public accommodations ordinance. We do have WBE initiatives and efforts that, based upon my memo and my research, we're okay in terms of continuing to apply those. So outside of the two areas I've identified, I think the bill has very minimal impact. Now, again, only talking about in terms of city operations, policies, and resolutions. Now, in terms of what council wants to do with respect to expressing concern about the legislation, that's certainly up to council. And I guess to answer Council Member Adams' question, yes, a lot of municipalities have adopted resolutions. I don't know what impact, if any, they will have upon the General Assembly. But I do know, just in terms of city operations and city and impacts on the city of Winston-Salem, the two areas that I have consistently said are impacted by the bill appear to be, there appears to be an effort to address those. So.
Any other questions for City Attorney?
I'll just say, we did receive a detailed memo from Ms. Carmen, and I don't know if you want to make that part of the public record or not, because it's certainly covered a lot more things than she has just covered here.
It doesn't matter to me. I have a copy that I can.
I was
present.
kind of saying the newspaper might have an interest in it.
I just gave it to Wes.
Did you? Okay, well, Wes, wake up there, buddy. I do have some comments on later, but
Okay.
that was my only comment first.
We do have 8 people signed up to speak on this topic, and if it's okay with the committee, I'd like to go ahead and give them an opportunity. I would like folks to keep their comments as short as possible so we can accommodate everyone. My first guest on the list is Liam Hooper, and if we can keep them to around 3 minutes or so, that'd be great.
Yes, sir.
If you can give us your name and address.
Liam Michael Hooper, 2500 Amesbury Road, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27103. Thank you, council members and committee members, for the opportunity to have this conversation with you. I am most grateful for your willingness to even entertain the topic of Councilman Bessie's resolution on HB2, and I do think that it's important that we're having this conversation today after Governor McCrory has issued his executive order, which is basically meaningless, right? So when last we spoke, I focused on with you the vilification of my people, those being transgender people who are being placed on the altar of deflection politics in order for us to sneak in all of these other things that Councilman Bessie has identified for you in the resolution. Those are my primary concerns. My people are used to being vilified. But the greater issue here is not whether we will survive or we'll figure out where to go to the restroom. The issue is that this bill was used to limit your power and to limit our freedom and to limit our legal recourse. In addition to the problematic language of biological sex, which I am personally exploring with some attorneys whether or not we can even use that term. First of all, I did not stop being a biological entity just because I chose to change my gender to one more consistent with my own self-understanding. I'm still a biological entity, and my gender is male. So there's a huge misnomer in that verbiage, and I think we have a legal leg to stand on with that. In addition to that, though, this executive order is really just throwing us a bone, right? It's deflecting attention again and playing word games, and words matter. So we add sexual orientation and gender identity to the description, but we still do not have legal recourse. That verbiage is then meaningless, right? Your power as a local government is still limited. The minimum wage is still capped. This is still anti-worker, anti-people, and anti-local government legislation, and that concerns me deeply. I think Councilman Bessie has pointed out quite eloquently that the world is watching. The entire country is watching, and the world is watching, and we all see this for what it is. It's deflection, plantation politics. People don't like that. There's a revolution sweeping this country, one about diversity in unity and unity in diversity, not in spite of or because of. This matters. Words matter. Your words today matter. The country is watching. The world is watching. And I want my home, my city, to be a place that I can proudly continue to live in. I want my city council to be a city council that I know it to be, one of conscience and concern that I can be proud to support, and one that recognizes that it may not understand me. You may not understand me or my people, but what I do know you understand at your heart is that anytime we allow any people to be laid on the altar of a deeper freedom-taking agenda, we are in trouble. Any time that we allow a people to be abused in this way so that we can cover up the removal of our rights, freedoms, and protections, none of us are free. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Cross.
I'm Karen Cross, 421 Spring Lake Farm, Winston-Salem. I realize this topic is very broad, and I want to talk about the bathroom issue because that's made so much press and things. And I'm here as a concerned citizen, and I'm concerned about our communities, everyone in our community, their physical health, their mental health, and looking at transgender people who have a much, much higher suicide rate compared to cisgender people, have a much higher depression rate. And there's so much misunderstanding about this whole bathroom issue. As Leon said when I was talking to him earlier, people have been going to the bathroom with transgender people, they just never knew it. Okay? And what I'm asking is, how is this bathroom law going to change anything? Has there been cases of bathroom assault by transgender people? I'm not aware of that. And my understanding is that municipalities that have passed anti-discrimination laws allowing people to use a bathroom of their identified gender has had no increase in bathroom violence. The laws governing people's behavior in bathrooms has not changed. And I'm not sure what all the people who are so fearful of this, what they think, how this is going to change and what this is going to protect them from, because I don't know what has been I don't know what this is going to fix. I think it's going to cause a lot of trauma. And looking at especially school-age kids, there was an interview with a young woman who said she felt uncomfortable in the locker room and would feel even more uncomfortable if a person of the opposite sex was in the locker room with her. Well, how would she feel if she was told, okay, from now on you're going to go into, you have to use the boys' locker room? That, well, of course we can't do that. That would not be fair. Well, how is it fair to do what we're going to do with gender identity? We have to think about the unintended consequences. How much more violence is there going to be when someone looking very effeminate has to use the men's bathroom? Where's the protection there for those people who are going to be subjected to a lot of violence? Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Spangler.
Good afternoon. I'm Laura Spangler. I'm from the Southwest Ward, 528 Cherbourg Avenue.
Good afternoon.
I would like to say that I believe that HB2 has some wisdom and common sense for the common good, particularly regarding bathroom privacy and gender separation. I do not think that when we establish public policy and resolutions, we should allow the tail to wag the dog. There is a very small group that is crying discrimination. And with all due respect to every human being, I am the pastor of a civil rights church. It is not discrimination. It is not a civil rights issue when you are trying to change the way that you were created. It's very important, I believe, to ensure the protection of our children and our youth, particularly in restroom and locker rooms. So, Mr. Bessie, I do not think your resolution is needed. I think we need to just leave things the way they are, and HB2 is helping to do that. I do not think that this resolution is based on wisdom, I do think it is based on a false sense of discrimination. And most importantly, God is watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Betsy Truscott.
Hello, I'm Betsy Truscott from the West Ward, 5021 Stockdale Place. I looked at that bathroom part and I skipped right past it. I've used bathrooms that, male and female both use and had no problem. But the part that did get to me was the civil rights part. I'm old enough, and some of you are too, to remember when that civil rights bill was passed in this country and know all the changes that have come about since then. I was the beneficiary of one, even though I'm white. There was an institution here in our state that was required to open up jobs to more than one sex and more than one race, and I got to be part of an electrical construction group eventually. Slowly worked my way in there, got my license. Never would have happened without the civil rights bill. So when I see us turning our back on the civil rights, that's when I get really nervous and really unhappy. I don't understand why we want to go back 50 years. You know, it wasn't better in the past. It definitely wasn't better in the past. And I'm appreciative that you as a local government want to stand up for us as citizens, but also I feel you need to stand up for yourselves as a local government because, as has been said by the lawyer and other folks, the state is, the legislature in Raleigh is reaching out and touching local government. It changed in Greensboro, it changed the composition of the city council. Here it's changed when we hold our elections. Didn't ask any of us about that. So I see a power grab coming from this Republican-led legislature that needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina Novaton?
Good afternoon. Well, I want to first appreciate.
Can I get your name and address, please?
Oh, yes, I apologize. Christina Novaton, 241 South Cherry Street.
Thank you.
27101. I am a recently new North Carolina resident. I finally have a voter ID and everything else. I'm very excited about that. I am here to say that I think discrimination is more than race and gender, and I think it's more than what the previous young lady mentioned, not the one right before me, but the one right before that. So I do want to say that I came to Winston-Salem. I am a Salem College FLIR student, which means I'm an adult student. I came to Salem in order to create change in the community because that's what I'm about. My partner does not identify in the gender binary, and I respect them every day more and more for it. So for folks that it makes you feel uncomfortable, I tell you to live in your uncomfortableness. Because as a person of color, as a queer person of color, I have to walk in that uncomfortable feeling every day. So I want to thank folks here who do understand that this is important. And Betsy, I think your resolution is needed. And I think that if folks are concerned about civil rights, then maybe we should have a history lesson of what civil rights really is and talk about where civil rights is going and how this civil rights movement is continuing. So I want to thank you for your time once again and hope that you make the right decision, because it's like my dear friend mentioned, it's language, it's words, they all matter. And people matter no matter who they identify as or what their sexual orientation is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Gidtree?
Chris Gittrey, 601 South Church Street, Winston-Salem, 27101. Good evening, honorable and distinguished members of the council. My name is Chris, and I identify as gender fluid. I'm in opposition of HB2 because of the ramifications it has for me and other members of the LGBTQ community and other categories affected. I am calling for approval of Councilmember Bessie's resolution. I call all of you to stand in solidarity with our community and approve Bessie's resolution as a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Char Van Schneck?
My name is Char Van Skank. I'm a permanent resident of Virginia, but I'm currently attending Wake Forest University. So, once again, I used to have a speech that I was going to say, but I decided to scrap it and go with a response to someone else. And with that, I begin with Galatians 3:28. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is no male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. With that said, God is watching. And God, as we all know from the Bible, created different sects, created different races, created different genders, so that we can understand ourselves better. I think that it is immoral. I think it is a wrong interpretation of the Bible to tell somebody who is transgender that they are wrong, because God does not make mistakes. Therefore, I am very certain that my position as transgender is not a mistake. I was created so that I can challenge the way that the gender binary operates, so that I can understand the way that the gender binary works and influences our lives. Therefore, the resolution HB2 is fundamentally anti-Christian. It is fundamentally against what God wants us to believe in ourselves, which is to understand each other, respect each other, and learn from each other. So, I mean, I know that she was like part of a church, but I figured she would know that much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Danny Benitez?
Hello, thank you for your time. I'm Denny Benitez. I live at 1109 Polo Road, Winston-Salem. I'm a Wake Forest University student. And I'd like to start by saying Winston-Salem is a growing city that has a potential to become very prosperous. As many of you may know, progress cannot happen if we leave people in our city behind, meaning our trans people. Big cities across the U.S. have publicly opposed the HB2 bill. I think it's time we do too. Jesus calls us to love one another. What does that mean? To me, this means that we love and respect each other. I don't think this HB2 bill is respecting and loving our trans people. Many people believe that trans people are the only ones that would benefit if the HB2 bill was repealed. Now, I have a family. I have 2 parents that are alive and 3 siblings. I'm the oldest of the 3 of the 4. And they're affected by this. They have seen what I have been through. They have seen me say I want to die and I don't want to live in this world anymore. They're affected by this. My mom has terrible anxiety. My dad constantly worries about my safety. This bill is affecting more than just trans people. It's affecting the loved ones of these trans people. So I would just like to say this bill, if you oppose it, it will be sending out a message to not only trans people but their loved ones. And it will also, I mean, if that doesn't motivate you to oppose it, then the economic state of North Carolina right now hopefully will move you to oppose it, because as you have seen, a lot of artists and a lot of corporations have moved out of North Carolina. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to comment on this? Yes.
Hi, my name is Sally Hirsch. I'm at 1831 Brantley Street in Ardmore here in Winston-Salem. And I want to thank you, Councilman Bessie, my council person, for bringing this ordinance to our attention. And I was late today because I was at Wake Forest attending the ERA-NC Alliance commissioning program for Equal Pay Day, for the ERA-NC organization to help this state to pass and ratify, I should say, the Equal Rights Amendment. And they had a message, and I thought I would just share that. They said, HB2 eliminates all existing state law remedies for women from being demoted, transferred, or terminated from their job because of their sex. The new law prevents workplace discrimination claims for all North Carolina workers from North Carolina courts. HB2 targets women with the restriction on minimum wage. HB2 overturns and eliminates all existing local ordinances and any ability to enact family leave policies, child welfare protections, etc., etc. Women are fed up with laws like HB2 that diminish our rights so significantly that they reinforce the need for constitutional protection for women. The ERA was written in 1921. If my history, I wasn't around then, but you know, it's been over 90 years and we have not ratified equal rights for women in this country. And we need to start working on these issues now and make some real changes. You know, a lot of us are getting gray and getting old, and we're tired. And if a man believes he's a woman, feels it inside and has biological tendencies, if a woman believes she's a man, we need to protect everyone. And so thank you so much for this ordinance, and I hope that you will pass it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So at this time, do we want to take questions from committee members or comments on the resolution?
I'll start.
Mr. Clark?
First off, for the folks in the room, this is actually a committee meeting, and 2 of us up here are not on the committee. Mr. Montgomery and I are not on the committee. We get a nice seat, but we can simply recommend or make comments. We do not vote at the committee level. I've got just a rambling comments, and I'll try to be as brief as I can. First off, I would question the folks out there who say to ratify this. Nowhere in here does it say to repeal HB2. And nowhere in here does it say it supports Charlotte's resolution on bathrooms, just FYI. Having said that, I do have some concerns with what Charlotte did, and I have some concerns with what Raleigh did, and we seem to be only addressing what Raleigh did. I will just comment briefly on the bathroom issue because that's what Charlotte did. And a lot of people say, well, it's bigger than the bathroom issue. To me, it's not. If Charlotte had not put that in their ordinance, we wouldn't be here. Because basically the first part of their ordinance just confirmed what our city attorney just mentioned. It basically regurgitated what the federal law is. And that would have been nice, and I don't even think it would have made the paper. But what Charlotte did was say that you may use whatever bathroom you so wish, and it also said anyone that does business with the city of Charlotte, and that's public or private companies, had to adhere to that. I will say, in public, on TV, I have a major concern with people of different sexes using different restrooms. It has nothing to do with perverts in the bathroom. The reason, right down that hall are two bathrooms. One's got a men's label and one's got a women. At my church, we have a men's and women's restroom. There is a concern amongst the general public, and it's been here a long time, about, and I would use the word locker room more than bathrooms. I'm not so much concerned about bathrooms and locker rooms. Undressing or dressing in front of folks that don't look like them. And that's why, I know we have Wake Forest students here, you have a men's locker room and a ladies' locker room. Now, having said that, I do know that there's some folks that don't fit in that category, and that is an issue. I'd be curious how Wake Forest deals with it. It seemed like me the answer would be to have a third bathroom or whatever, that, and some places have that. But anyway, I do have a concern with that, and it is interesting that this resolution does not address that. As far as what Raleigh did, I have concerns with what Raleigh did as well. I have two general ones, and Ms. Carmen went over some very legalese type stuff, which may be incorporated in this. Number one is the issue of state versus federal court. I am not an attorney, but I think I grasp enough to know that what we've done is moved any issues like this to the federal level versus state level. And that, again, I'm not an attorney, but that seems like to me to be an issue worth mentioning. The biggest one has to do, I think, and it's not said verbatim in here, but that has to do with there appears to be now an inconsistency between federal law and state law. And that's kind of what's got all this in a ruckus. And we're sitting here, we take an oath of office, as do, I think, the governor and everybody else, that says we will adhere to the Constitution and laws of the state of North Carolina, not inconsistent with the laws and Constitution of the United States. So we're sitting up here going, what are we supposed to do if one law seems to say this and one law seems to say that? And I think, to me, that is the big issue that we're struggling with. And I think, again, from what I could tell, the federal government has done a pretty good job in their specificity of defining what that is, whereas the state law doesn't seem to do that. So is there a conflict or not? But I think it's a conflict that has to be resolved, and if Raleigh doesn't resolve it, I think the courts will. The other two things I will just mention that Ms. Carmen pointed out had to do with two specific things that she brought up, and I won't repeat those because she did. As far as to the specific resolution, Mr. Bessie, I do have some concerns. I do think this is I'll just read, and Mr. Carmen, I'll address this to you, the top of our page 22, which is the second page of his, where he says, local governments may have been stripped of their ability to use their contract bidding process to promote the development of local minority businesses. In your letter to us, your memo, you specifically said, in your opinion, that has not been changed. Is that correct?
As it relates to the city of Winston-Salem, because well, let me back up for a second. The HB2 has a provision, it's 160A-20.1, which is in section 2.3. I think there was some concern that where it says a city may not require a private contractor under this section to abide by any regulations or controls on the contractor's employment practices or mandate or prohibit the provision of goods, services, or accommodations to any member of the public as a condition of bidding on a qualification-based selection, except as otherwise required or allowed by state law. I think there was concern that maybe that provision took away some rights in terms of our ability to require contractors to do certain things. but because it talks about employment practices, which are normally practices an employer imposes upon its employee, after reading that section and talking to various folks, including folks at the School of Government, I don't really think that limits us in the way I think people think. Not only that, I think the General Assembly back in 2013 made it clear to municipalities that we could not impose conditions like livable wages or living wages on our contractors as a condition of bidding. Right. So I do think HB2 perhaps did take away some authority in that area, but much of it, I think, was taken away in 2013. Does that answer your question?
Well, I'm getting to 2013 in a minute. Let me go to the previous page. The bottom, it says, and I'm just started halfway through the sentence, that we can no longer require good employment practice, wages, and salary, sick or family leave, or other benefits. It is my understanding before HB2 and everything else, we didn't have those rights anyway.
As it relates to our contract,
yes,
right?
Yes. My point being, we could put in here, whereas the city of Winston-Salem may or may not have the right to print money. Well, we didn't have that right in December. We don't have it now. I think we're crying wolf in here on some things that aren't important and leaving out some things that are important. And that's my point there. We have never been able to tell an employer you have to pay a certain wage, or you have to offer family leave, or you have to offer vacation, this, that, and the other. We've never had that authority. And it was reiterated in 2013, which is a different law. But before HB2, we didn't have that. They didn't take it away, and I think you're being disingenuous to put that in here. I think you're crying wolf when there are some legitimate concerns, but what you're raising are things that we didn't have the authority anyway. Also, I think there are some words in here that are very terse that I would not use when addressing the General Assembly. I think in politics we have gotten to the point of disrespecting everybody, and I think there's a few words I would take out. So while I cannot say anything, I think if you could write this so that it addresses in some specificity our specific concerns, and I've also asked the city attorney, she's done some of this, to give specific recommendations. It gets back to your comment, Ms. Adams. I think another resolution is just another resolution, but I think if we can actually say, here's the language that we have concerns with, and here's how we would suggest you address them, that might not end up in the circular file on the floor. They may say, well, okay, I hear what they're saying. They're concerned about this specific item or this incompatibility between federal and state law, and here's how they suggest we address it. Anyway, those are just my comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Montgomery.
Just one in terms of when we look at the resolution as it stands, I am for the most part in terms of resolution in support of the resolution going forward as it stands today, barring any additional changes that Councilmember Bessie may offer. But what I believe that we accomplished with this are a couple of things. One, make it very clear the position of the city of Winston-Salem when it comes to this, regardless of some of the things that we cannot or we did not or do not currently have the ability to impact today. But it's very clear where we stand as a community, as a city, and we have people within our community who would like for this as a city to present this type of resolution to the General Assembly. For those of us who look at this and are challenged around the big thing that has been used, which is the bathrooms, as the largest piece of this has come up as a fear tactic in my mind to be used to galvanize support for something that I think if people had great opportunity to have civil dialogue and discussion around, may come up with different thoughts on it. For I can say for myself that initially when the first conversations around this bill came up around bathrooms, I wrestled with the terms and understanding where we were and what we were going to do and how we could implement and how this would work. But the fact of the matter is, it is, again, a place of fear. It is a place of challenge that people try to raise when you say, well, this is not the way that we're accustomed to. The fact of the matter is that for a long time in this country, people were not comfortable eating in the same restaurant with people that didn't look like them. They were not comfortable going to the same shopping places with people that looked like them. They were not comfortable swimming in the same swimming pools with people that did not look like them. But today, this is a much different community and a much different place. And I think that these are real conversations and real dialogues that we have to have. And one of the absences that we have today is the fact that we have the absence of real true dialogue and real opportunities to foster understanding across this, because what this bill does is not offer the opportunity for dialogue on this issue, but it puts a blockade between two groups of individuals that would desire desire to have conversation and dialogue that may get us to a better place as a community. And as I said at the last council meeting, and I often refrain as much as I possibly can when we begin to have a religious conversation debate. One of my former professors at Wake Forest, Dr. Dunn, God rest his soul, he would turn over in his grave listening to some of the debate and conversation, an advocate for separation of church and state, an advocate for those, a preacher himself, but an advocate for the separation of church and state, would urge us to look at this through a lens of our faith, but through a lens of our morality, through a lens of our respect for general people, through the lens of our support for people and humanity, and to understand that God watches the good and the bad, and God loves us all. And so that same God watches us all and watches what we do and we don't do. And so we must have respect for all.
Thank you. Councilman Ratters.
Yes. Building on what the other council members have said already, I will support this in lieu of any other changes or comments that Councilmember Bessie wants. The one thing we have to understand is we have to stand together in solidarity. My resolution, again, as to the attorney, may not look like Raleigh, Charlotte, Greensboro, Chapel Hill, Asheville, but the main core of the resolution is that we cannot stand by and let this happen in our state or any state in our country. I think that we have to have strong language. We have been listening to strong language the past 4 years coming out of the General Assembly, and I think it's time, and maybe I think it was a timing thing for this to happen, the transgender community. You're trailblazers, really. You are a part of the revolution. You are the freedom riders and all of those other people back in the 50s and 60s that said, you know what, it's now or it's never. The time is now that we start to recognize there is no difference. We're all human beings. We're part of humankind. And we need to start learning to respect each other in that vein. I don't think like the slogans we've said, this is not us. This is not North Carolina. This is not the Carolina I grew up, born and raised, past 62 years in this state. There's been some trials and tribulations, but I think this situation and this issue of where people can go to the bathroom, it was the issue they used to put a wedge between everybody, and they did it in the middle of the night, and they did it like they did back in the day, back in a smoke-filled room when it was only white males there, and they made a decision on how our lives are supposed to be led. I say here in North Carolina, I, for one, D.D. Adams, I'm going to stand up again, like I told you, for what's right or just. I'm going down swinging. I'll be in Raleigh on April the 25th because I believe this is a civil rights issue. I believe that the core of this has to do with discrimination. And again, as they stated last night, if they come for you and you and you, and then when they come for me, who's going to be there to help me? So it's my duty, and I think this council's responsibility to stand up again for what's right and what's just.
I'd like to make a couple comments. I guess what bothers me most about this is the speed and the lack of input with which this legislation was enacted. I've been an elected official for 2.5 years, and I've learned pretty quickly that when you try to ram legislation through, it backfires on you. It creates more controversy and more divisiveness than it solves. And I think we're in a world now where, especially in the city of Winston-Salem, the city of arts and innovation, we need innovative people who think differently and act differently and look differently if we're to succeed. We are in a culture and an economy where we survive on our brains and our talent. We don't have to have a seaport. We don't have to have a train station. We have to have good minds. And those minds sometimes don't think and talk and dress like the rest of us. So I think it's an advantage that we have that I hope we don't squander. That being said, I would like to turn to Councilmember Bessie to see if he's got anything that he would like to change in his.
I do have, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have one technical change, a quick response before that to a concern raised by Councilmember Clark, and then I'll move adoption of resolution with that small technical amendment and have some additional brief comments, if I may. First, our attorney, thank you very much for adding to your already full plate of other legal duties, additional research on this, trying to do it on the fly.
Yeah.
And I know that you're in the process. You've been collecting memos from folks with the School of Government, at least one of which apparently included analyses in one memo that, after talking with you again, now she's not so sure of. So.
She just didn't address the topic.
Right. She didn't address the topic, but she did in her original memo very clearly saying that it raised questions about the ability of local governments to impose contracting requirements that go beyond the projects for construction of over $300,000. Now, and now she's not sure about that, and I respect that. Based on your question about the definition of employment versus contracting and what covers, I've got a couple of comments about that. But
can I clarify one thing? Because I don't want you to misquote what I said. I would say she's not sure about that. What she said was that she did not look at the language and address the language employment practices, which I mentioned earlier. But she has looked at it and said, you know, employment practices means employer-employee and not contractor and general contractor. And she did not have time to consider the various local acts, because we have a local act that deals with minority and women participation, which is still legal. It has not been preempted by the law. So she just didn't have that time, as her blog was put out the day after the legislation passed. So she didn't have the time to address the definition or that word or that phrase for local acts.
Well,
in fairness to her.
To be then fair to her, since her original statements have been raised, I'll just read from what she said in writing, which is, she has a question that's posed, do the new contracting limitations affect HUB requirements, that's historically underutilized business requirements? She points out that there is building construction authority, particularly for projects over $300,000. But then she goes on and closes by saying, however, to the extent a city or county has adopted a local ordinance or policy that extends HUB good faith efforts requirements for bidders to other categories of contracts beyond those specified under state law, building construction projects costing $300,000 or more, it is unclear whether such an ordinance or policy remains valid. And that is all I've said on the salient point in the resolution, that that local governments may have been stripped. And that is the provision to which I have the technical amendment, which I will get to in just a moment. What I was trying to get to, though, with regard to Councilmember Clark's point that some of these matters may have already been in state law, including but not necessarily limited to the 2013 requirement, that's possibly the case. And certainly there's a good argument that that was the case for several restrictions, but there is specific language in this bill that recodifies that restriction. In section 2.3, it now reads, a city may not require a private contractor under this section to abide by regulations or controls on the contractor's employment practices or mandate the provision of goods, services, or accommodations to any member of the public as a condition of bidding on a contract or a qualification-based selection, except as otherwise required or allowed by state law. There appears to have been question in the minds of at least some legislators regarding whether that provision had been nailed shut earlier, and so they have gone further under the cover of a bathroom debate to further impose restrictions or recodify and nail down even tighter limitations on our rights to advance the employment-related rights of employees with the companies or subcontractors, potentially with the companies with which we do business with public local money. The general presumption in legal interpretation is that the legislature doesn't take an action that is pointless, and courts tend to give deference into reading the synthetic nature of multiple state legal provisions to conclude that there was some import to the new changes. At any rate, with regard to the language that I am proposing, the one technical amendment, I think it's significant that, as Attorney Carmen points out, there is a specific statewide provision which gives the authority to do the minority and business-owned women enterprise subcontractor goals for construction projects of $300,000 or more. And there is significance to the fact that we presently have a local act which can be read reasonably as extending our authority to other types of contracts. However, even in that area, other cities do not typically have that added local authority. And one of the interpretive memos that was cited earlier talks about, to the extent a city or county without such clear local authority has adopted provisions that go beyond it. There's a question about whether that remains valid. In addition, giving the state legislature's pattern of late and its stated emphasis in HB2 of the need for statewide uniformity on business regulations, I have no faith that it won't take the next step of continuing to repeal and restrict local authorities such as we presently have as they are discovered. And finally, a lot of this is not in black letter, but it's interpretive. There is sound legal reasoning offered for the interpretations that our authority is protected, but that does not guarantee that that is how a court would rule, especially when the ruling would in effect run counter to the legislature's expressed intent to crack down on local flexibility. We've all seen a recent example of the U.S. Supreme Court's deciding to strike down a long-standing legal requirement that was part of the Voting Rights Act because the court unilaterally decided that the rationale for that part of the act was no longer valid. I would be concerned that our own local authority in minority and women's business enterprise participation, since it relies explicitly in that local act on what's needed to redress past discrimination, is vulnerable to judicial activism of similar nature. Altogether, those factors, I think, leave continuing concerns about the future of our local contracting authority after HB2, and certainly, as my colleague, Councilmember Adams, points out, there is even broader concern about other cities, towns, and counties' authority, and if we don't speak up for them now, who's going to speak up for us later? So I would leave that section in that references local governments may have been stripped of their ability, but I would modify the final words to read, instead of broadly saying public projects, I would say many public contracts, so that it would read, local governments may have been stripped of their ability to use their contract bidding process to promote the development of local minority and women-owned businesses as contractors and subcontractors own many public contracts. It recognizes that there is some authority, but there is a question about how broad it will be. Now, with that technical correction, I would move adoption of the resolution, and if there's a second, would comment.
Second for the amended resolution.
Thanks. Thank you for everybody, all of my colleagues, on your thoughtful comments, and I would like to thank everyone from the public who took the time and effort to come out and speak tonight and speak on a difficult topic, and I mean thanks to everybody, including those that didn't agree with my position. I tell you frankly, I think that what happened with this bill in its original intent was just another case of politics as usual. A particularly low version thereof, Scapegoating a relatively small and particularly vulnerable minority, in this case transgendered individuals, playing on fears that folks have, good folks often have, of the unknown, and interactions with individuals that they don't know well, with a group they don't know well. And it was done originally for political distraction purposes, as I think one of our commenters clearly noted. Came the day, the General Assembly convened in that one session, that one-day session, and over the course of 12 hours revealed, passed, and had signed into law by the governor a much broader bill that had mutated into an attack on anti-discrimination work against a broader set of categories, and in the process also slipped in multiple provisions to undercut local authority trying to advance the economic rights of our citizens locally. I don't think most of the legislators knew all of the problems that they were creating when they passed that. I know that not all the legislators had a chance to even see the bill before about 5 minutes before a committee meeting started on it. This is not an attack on all legislators, and most particularly, it is not an attack on the members of our local delegation. I suspect that most of them, if not all of them, were in the same category of, duh, what is this bill doing? And I would suspect that perhaps even most of those who originated the bill and its extremely broad provisions did not anticipate the intensity or swift nature of the adverse reaction to its provisions from not just concerned citizens, but the usually quite conservative business community. And as I noted earlier, bipartisan adverse reaction from around the country. All this does is call attention to a number of the problems that the bill creates that have been overlooked in the, oh, look over here, scapegoating. And in, I think, very polite language, asks the legislature as a whole and the members of our delegation in particular, who maybe didn't think about those problems ahead of time, maybe didn't realize all the problems ahead of time, to reconsider and undo those problems now. I would expect that there's a sort of a broad buyer's regret out there among a number of legislators, and this kind of courteous request to reconsider, I would hope, would help move the needle toward getting us further along the right path of fixing the problems that a lot of folks inadvertently contributed to. So the motion as made and seconded.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, likewise? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Any other business before the committee? If not, we are adjourned.
Public Works